Trump's tariff war with Canada is spiraling into complete chaos, and Mark Carney just showed the world exactly how to handle an economic bully. While the American president desperately scrambles for a deal that could save face, Canada's prime minister walked into the White House on Tuesday with one clear message: we're not backing down, and we're certainly not becoming your 51st state. The meeting between Trump and Carney wasn't just another diplomatic photo op.
Be tempered for what is going to come out of this meeting. Trade is going to be a focus. Clearly, there was some speculation that we were maybe going to see some of the sectoral tariffs, some relief from them, at least at this point. But what are we hearing? What do we know as the prime minister now, again, starting to meet with Donald Trump?
Yeah, Matt, I was speaking with a PMO source just moments ago, and their words were, don't expect anything. And now we have seen other government sources saying there could be some movement on some tariffs, possibly some relief when it came to steel tariffs or aluminum tariffs as well. But you speak to people in those industries, and there's also a healthy amount of skepticism when it comes to seeing those tariffs removed, in large part because of how, the president has been very clear that these are a core part of his economic philosophy. This is how he is intending to govern. And you need look no further than yesterday, where he announced that there would be incoming truck tariffs on heavy-duty and medium-duty trucks as of November 1st to 25%. Now, that date has shifted. He'd announced them before as well. But it's clear that Donald Trump believes these are not only a way to generate finances, but also, he said yesterday, to be a peacekeeper. And so ahead of this meeting with Mark Carney, he knew this was going to be on the discussion. He knew relief is what Canada is looking for, but he was also making it clear that onshoring manufacturing is equally important to him. Have a listen.
Yeah, okay. CTV's Colton Prale live in Ottawa for us. We're going to just Colton, stand by for us here. We're going to go into the Oval Office where Mark Carney, again, Prime Minister, is sitting down with Donald Trump. Let's have a brief listen into this conversation as these two might take some questions ahead of their formal meeting.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's an honor to have the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, who I have made very popular. He's an extremely popular Prime Minister. And I'm very honored to do it because I liked him. Right from the beginning, I've liked him, and we've had a good relationship.
It was a high-stakes showdown between a leader who's weaponizing trade to get his way and a country that's finally had enough. In that Oval Office, as cameras rolled and reporters watched, two very different visions of North American trade collided. Trump, maintaining his aggressive stance, insisted that Canadian companies were fleeing to the United States, while Carney emphasized areas where the two nations are stronger together. Canada is the only G7 nation still locked in a trade battle with Trump this year, but unlike other allies who've bent the knee, Ottawa isn't rushing to cave to American pressure. And there's a very good reason why. Trump's trade war has become his economic Achilles heel, and Canada is exploiting every weakness. The numbers tell the story Trump doesn't want you to hear. His tariffs have turned into the largest tax hike on American families since 1993, costing the average household nearly $1,300 in 2025.
Prime Minister Mark Carney landed in the U.S. Capitol, hopeful to make progress on punishing tariffs on Canadian steel. And U.S. President Donald Trump is expecting it.
He's going to ask about tariffs because a lot of companies from Canada are moving into the United States,
And there's a new levy for the leaders to talk about. The president posted on social media that the U.S. will impose 25% tariffs on light and medium-duty trucks. Trump's former ambassador to Canada has this warning for the prime minister ahead of...
The president's announcement of new 25% tariffs on Canadian trucks only adds to the mounting pressure on American consumers, while former ambassadors warn that retaliatory measures won't work against Trump's aggressive approach. Meanwhile, Canada has strategically positioned itself to weather the storm while Trump's own policies backfire spectacularly. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. When Trump returned to the White House, he immediately launched what he called his tariff assault on global trading partners. But Canada became his primary target for a very personal reason. Trump genuinely believed he could bully America's northern neighbor into submission, maybe even into becoming a U.S. state. The president imposed crushing tariffs across multiple Canadian sectors, 25% on steel and aluminum, 35% on general goods under his fentanyl justification, and most recently, 10% on lumber with threats of more to come. These weren't just economic measures, they were designed to break Canada's will and force Prime Minister Mark Carney into accepting whatever deal Trump offered. But Trump fundamentally miscalculated. Instead of weakening Canada's resolve, his aggressive tactics triggered something he never expected: Canadian unity and defiance. Carney won his election earlier this year specifically by promising to stand up to Trump's bullying. His campaign slogan was "Elbows Up," a hockey term for taking a defensive stance. Canadians weren't looking for a leader who would appease Trump. They wanted someone who would fight back.
Ontario's premier is urging Carney to take a hard line with Trump.
We will not waver. A message to the Prime Minister. You're going down there Tuesday. You better fight like hell. Don't roll over and keep fighting.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford captured this sentiment perfectly when he urged Carney to take a hard line, declaring, "We will not waver," and telling the Prime Minister directly, "You better fight like hell. Don't roll over." The economic reality of Trump's tariff war reveals why his strategy is failing. While Trump claims these measures will bring jobs back to America and force better deals, the opposite is happening. Canada supplies about 50% of U.S. aluminum imports and 20% of steel imports. When Trump slapped 25% tariffs on these materials, he didn't just hurt Canada, he devastated American manufacturers who depend on these raw materials.
Well, if it's true, it certainly represents a breakthrough. You have to remember in context that we have the lowest tariff rates in the world at about 5%. That's because most of the products which cross the border are CUSMA compliant. The problem is that there are some exceptions which the United States have carved out that are at 50%, and that includes steel and aluminum. And for those particular industries, they're being really hard done by. But we have reason to believe that the United States is suffering as well from the steel and aluminum tariffs. In the case of aluminum, probably close to 75% of the aluminum used in the United States comes from Canada, which is really accelerating the cost for a lot of commodities within the United States and putting pressure on the government to find a compromise. So it wouldn't be surprised if there was some movement on those two commodities.
Former Ambassador Frank McKenna pointed out that 75% of aluminum used in the United States comes from Canada, creating intense pressure on the American government as these tariffs accelerate costs for U.S. commodities. The construction industry has been particularly hard hit. Home builders estimate that Trump's tariffs have added an average of $9,200 to the cost of building a new home. Steel, aluminum, copper, and lumber tariffs are making American housing more expensive just as the country faces an affordability crisis. Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, called Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs his worst trade policy yet, noting that increasing the price of key inputs for U.S. manufacturing industries is exactly what an American adversary would do. But here's where Trump's strategy gets even more problematic. The president has repeatedly threatened to make Canada the 51st state, believing this would pressure Canadian leaders into making concessions. Instead, it's had the opposite effect.
The auto sector, they're going to see an increase of over $107 billion. Other companies are seeing it. John Deere, they're laying over 280 people off because of tariffs. We're seeing it across every single sector. So it's time to sit down, let's get a deal, or let's start hitting back.
Premier, are you advocating the approach that Prime Minister Trudeau had more than the approach that Prime Minister Carney had? Trudeau, of course, imposed counter tariffs, and it didn't work. But you think we should go back to the Trudeau approach?
Well, I think we take an approach that let's get a deal. If the Americans want to see inflation stop, you make a deal with Canada. You want to see the economy grow, make a deal with Canada. That's what we need to do, because it will hurt both countries if we don't. But you sure don't sit back and get beat up by a bully every single day. It's like a kid.
Doug Ford didn't mince words about this approach. You sure don't sit back and get beat up by a bully every single day. It's like a kid going to the school, liared and getting punched in the face every day. It's time to hit back if you can't get a deal. Every time Trump mentions annexation, Canadian nationalism surges. Public opinion polls show that 67% of ethnic Canadians would give up their land to defend against American aggression. compared to only 38% of non-ethnic Canadians. Trump's threats have actually unified the country against him. During their May meeting at the White House, Carney told Trump directly that Canada would never be for sale. When Trump responded, "Never say never," Carney made his position even clearer. Canada is not for sale and won't be for sale ever.
We call the Golden Dome Missile Defense Shield. It'll be the most sophisticated in the world. You watched it do well until they had some problems at the end with a little bit of a lack of ammunition, defensive ammunition, but they've got that taken care of. But I tell you, it's what we're doing is so good, and we deserve it. You know, we help other countries with it. We don't have it ourselves. And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state.
The president's continued references to missile defense cooperation and his 51st state rhetoric have only angered Canadians further, complicating what should have been straightforward trade negotiations. The economic data shows why Canada can afford to be defiant. While trade accounts for 67% of Canada's GDP compared to only 24% of U.S. GDP, Canada has successfully diversified its trade relationships. Carney has pursued closer relations with the UK, France, and Australia, reducing Canada's dependence on American markets. The USMCA agreement, ironically negotiated by Trump himself during his first term, actually protects Canada from the worst of his tariff threats. More than 85% of Canada-US trade continues to be free of tariffs under the agreement, and Canada maintains the lowest average tariff rate of any American trading partner at just 5.6%. Trump's sectoral tariffs are painful, but they're not economically devastating. Meanwhile, Trump's trade war is creating serious problems for his own political coalition. American businesses that depend on Canadian materials are facing massive cost increases. The uncertainty created by Trump's constantly changing tariff policies has rattled stock markets and economic indicators. Even Trump himself wouldn't rule out the possibility of recession in a recent Fox News interview. The president's approach to the Tuesday meeting revealed just how desperate his position has become. Trump told reporters he expected Carney would ask about tariffs, adding that a lot of companies from Canada are moving into the United States, and everybody is moving back to the U.S. When asked if he would change his position on tariffs, Trump's response was simply, "I'm right," hardly the confident negotiating position of someone holding all the cards.
You know, the Liberals' excuses are tripping over each other. Last week, the Prime Minister said the American tariffs on Canada are so bad that that's why we have the fastest shrinking economy in the G7, the second highest unemployment, $52 billion of net investment that has fled, 86,000 jobs that have been lost. And now they're saying that we have the best possible position. Which is it? Why is our economy so bad? Because of failed Liberal diplomacy on trade or bad economic management?
Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has been relentless in highlighting these failures, pointing out that since Carney promised a win, American tariffs on Canada have doubled and 86,000 Canadians have lost their jobs. But the most telling moment came when Trump predicted that the people of Canada, they will love us again, acknowledging that his policies have seriously damaged the relationship between the two countries. Canadian tourism to the United States has declined sharply. Some stores have pulled American products from their shelves, and many Canadians feel a sense of betrayal that their closest ally has turned hostile. Trump's negotiating strategy reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of Canada's position. The president seems to believe that because America is the larger economy, Canada will eventually be forced to accept whatever terms HE offers. But this ignores several crucial factors that give Canada significant leverage. First, Canada's resources are essential to American industry. The country provides critical materials that American manufacturers can't easily source elsewhere. When Canada's Algoma Steel suspended all shipments to the U.S. in response to tariffs, it immediately created supply chain problems for American companies. Second, Canada's position within USMCA gives it legal protections that Trump can't easily override. The agreement is up for review in 2026, but any changes require consensus from all three parties, Canada, the US, and Mexico. Trump can't simply rewrite the deal unilaterally.
For example, energy security, oil, gas, some $70 billion in Canadian wealth has been transferred to the United States of America by giving them discounted oil. But we can put other things in the window. Critical minerals, something that are in large abundance within Canada, something that the United States needs. Uranium is a commodity which they really need, especially as they ramp up their nuclear program. And we can create right of first refusals or preferential treatment for the United States in some of those areas. And around defense, we're going to be increasing our defense spending almost 3 times, up to probably $150 to $160 billion a year by 2035. Right now, 75% of that to 85% is spent on kit from the United States of America. We can divert that. We can buy it from other places in the world, or we can commit to continuing relationship with the United States of America. So we have a lot of tools at our disposal, and quite frankly, we can create a lot of pain points for the United States should they persist in wanting to declare economic war on us.
McKenna outlined Canada's strategic advantages, including critical minerals, uranium supplies, and defense spending, commitments of $150 to $160 billion annually by 2035, with 75 to 85% currently spent on U.S. equipment, giving Canada multiple tools to create pain points for the U.S. if necessary. Third, and most importantly, Canada has time on its side. Trump's tariffs are creating immediate pain for American consumers and businesses, while Canada can absorb the economic impact and wait for either a better deal or a different American president. The pressure is actually on Trump to resolve this quickly, not on Carney. Conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has tried to pressure Carney by demanding he negotiate a win and warning that anything less would be considered a failure. But this political pressure actually strengthens Carney's position. He can't be seen as caving to Trump without facing severe domestic consequences, which means he has little room to make the kinds of concessions Trump is demanding. The broader implications of this standoff extend far beyond trade statistics. Trump's approach to Canada is being watched closely by other American allies who are wondering if they might be next. The president's willingness to use economic coercion against America's closest ally sends a message that no relationship is safe from his transactional approach to foreign policy. For Canada, successfully resisting Trump's pressure could establish the country as a leader among middle powers who refuse to be bullied by larger neighbors. Carney's approach of pursuing alternative partnerships while standing firm on core principles offers a model for other countries facing similar pressure. The meeting on Tuesday produced no major breakthroughs, exactly as expected.
I mean, look, my positions turned out to, everybody said I'm right. There's a lot of companies from Canada are moving into the United States, you know.
We are friends, we are allies.
Canada got some support from a delegation of governors from Great Lakes states, all of which are closely tied to the Canadian economy.
What is not helpful is the way in which the president has demeaned our neighbors in the north, suggesting that they should be the 51st state. I respect Canadian sovereignty.
The Liberal government has tried not to raise expectations around this trip, but there's no doubt that Carney would like to emerge with some kind of relief for Canadian industries struggling with.
Trump maintained his positions, stating they turned out to "everybody said I'm right," while claiming Canadian companies are moving to the United States. He acknowledged Canada as friends and allies while maintaining his tough trade position, promising that Carney would walk away very happy, but refusing to explain what he meant. This vague assurance suggests that any progress was likely minimal, perhaps some relief on steel and aluminum tariffs in exchange for discussions about broader issues. But the real victory for Carney was simply holding his ground. By refusing to make significant concessions while maintaining a diplomatic tone, he demonstrated that Trump's bullying tactics aren't working. The Canadian Prime Minister showed up, stated his position clearly, and left, without giving Trump the kind of dramatic win the president desperately needs. Trump's trade war with Canada has become a perfect example of how his negotiating style can backfire when applied to sophisticated international partners. His assumption that economic pressure would quickly force Canada into submission has proven completely wrong. Instead, his aggressive tactics have strengthened Canadian resolve, unified the country against American pressure, and created economic problems for his own supporters. The irony is that Trump probably could have negotiated a better trade relationship with Canada through traditional diplomatic channels. Most Canadians want a strong relationship with the United States, and there are legitimate issues that could be addressed through normal trade talks. But by immediately resorting to threats and ultimatums, Trump created a situation where any Canadian leader who makes significant concessions will be seen as weak. Looking ahead, this standoff is likely to continue until one side faces a crisis that forces a resolution. For Trump, that crisis could come from mounting economic pressure from American businesses hurt by his tariffs, or from political pressure as the costs of his trade war become more apparent to voters. For Canada, the pressure will come if Trump significantly escalates his tariff threats, or if the economic impact becomes too severe to absorb. But right now, Canada appears better positioned to wait this out than Trump is to maintain his aggressive stance. The country has successfully diversified its trade relationships, maintained unity in the face of American pressure, and demonstrated that middle powers don't have to accept economic bullying from larger neighbors. Mark Carney's visit to Washington this week wasn't about making a deal. It was about sending a message. Canada won't be intimidated, won't accept annexation threats, and won't sacrifice its sovereignty for economic convenience. In a world where authoritarian leaders increasingly use economic coercion to get their way, Canada's resistance offers hope that democratic values and national independence can still prevail. Trump's trade war with Canada has become his own trap. Every day it continues, it creates more problems for American businesses and consumers while strengthening Canadian resolve. The president who promised to win every negotiation is learning that some countries simply won't be bullied, no matter how much pressure he applies. And that might be the most important lesson of this entire standoff.